More of the Zach Gelb Show on Fox Sports 920 The Jersey.
Bengals and Eagles this Sunday at 1. This is the Zach Gelb Show, Fox Sports 920 The Jersey. The number, as always, if you want to get on board, 609-919-9200. Dave Lapham played for the Bengals from 1974 to 1983 and now does a tremendous job on their radio broadcast, and he's kind enough to give us a few minutes right now to break down this matchup on Sunday. Dave, Zach Gelb, appreciate a few minutes, and how are you?
Good, Zach. I appreciate the opportunity to visit.
Well, thank you for coming on, and I appreciate it. The Bengals, they're an enigma to me because I thought this was going to be a playoff team before the year, and now they sit at 3-7-1, and they're not going to be in the playoffs. We know that. You do their games. You've seen every snap this year. To you, what is your main reasons why the Bengals have struggled so much this year?
Well, it's in my opinion, more teams lose games by mistakes in the National Football League than win games by making big plays. And I think the Bengals are a great example of that this year. You know, in critical times of big football games, they made the critical mistake instead of the big play. Good example last week, they were in the red zone 5 times against the Ravens, and you have 2 red zone fumbles, you get no points, only 1 red zone touchdown. I mean, you're knocking on the door and just self-destructing. So that's kind of been the story of the season. Instead of making a key play at a critical moment, making that key mistake, and when they were making the playoffs 5 years in a row, 6 out of the last 7, was just the opposite. You know, they were winning those close games because they were making a big play instead of a big mistake. So it's caught up to them. If somebody told me before the season that it would be December and they would not have won 2 games in a row, they get a lot of my money. And if somebody told me they wouldn't have won a game in the month of November, would have gotten a lot more of my money, because that's been Marvin Lewis's best season. That's when the team is really starting to play well, because that's when you start to position yourself, you know, for the playoffs. So it's been one of those crazy years for sure.
I know the national narrative for the last few years, they put a lot of pressure on Marvin Lewis to give him a lot of criticism because his lack of success in the playoffs. You saw how it ended last year, lack of discipline, mistakes in that playoff loss, and this year it's been a disaster of a season. I know he's extended through 2017. Do you think Marvin Lewis will be back next year as the head coach of the Bengals?
I think the only way he's not is if he decides not to. There was a real succession plan where Hugh Jackson was going to take over for Marvin Lewis after 2 years. You know, Marvin did get an extension beyond this year, so he was going to be here in 2016, 2017, and then Hugh Jackson was going to be the guy. Well, Cleveland targeted him as their primary candidate and made an offer where he's going to make a heck of a lot more money in 2016 and 17 than staying as a Bengals offense coordinator / head coach in waiting. So took that job. So it sounds like Marvin Lewis was content to say, okay, that's it for me after 15 years. He's in his 14th now. So I don't know. Maybe if Marvin Lewis decides that he wants to come back and fulfill his contract, Mike Brown's not the type of owner to pay him $5+ million not to coach and then go hire another guy and pay him X number of dollars to coach. So, and honestly, Mike Brown is very slow to pull the trigger on those kind of things, and he's big on continuity and consistency, and making the playoffs 5 years in a row and 6 out of 7 is the best run ever in franchise history. Made the Super Bowl, you know, twice in the 80s, but never had more than back-to-back winning seasons. So it's been by far the biggest or the greatest regular season stretch. But he hasn't won a playoff game, obviously. But you know, in the AFC North, Pittsburgh's had 3 head coaches since '69, the Vietnam War. You know, they've had Noel, they've had Cowher, and now Tomlin. And in Baltimore, there's all kinds of consistency and continuity with Ozzie Newsome, and now Harbaugh's been there for eight years. And so Mike Brown believes that that's the model to follow, rather than the other team in the division, Cleveland, that reboots every year or two, and new general manager, new head coach, you know, new whatever. So his philosophy is be patient and stay the course.
We had that consistency in Philadelphia for a long time. You saw Andy Reid had a very long run with the Eagles. They got rid of him. They went to Chip Kelly. It didn't work, and now they're trying to recreate that Andy Reid era with Doug Peterson. You're right. He's been there a long time. You look at that era really from 2005 to 2015. The Bengals have been in the playoffs a lot more than not. Do the players still believe, though, in Marvin Lewis?
Yeah, that's the big, that's the thing that I think that everybody's going to have to sit down and talk about. Do they need a new voice? You know, is it, has he lost the locker room? I don't really think he has, because The players are. Every game is a close game. I mean, they're in every football game. They're within a score of every contest. It seems like in the fourth quarter. So it's not like they're laying down and quitting and getting blown up, and you're going to have to junk pile the whole thing. And I do think that with success becomes a rating of your staff. And he's lost 2 offensive coordinators and a defensive coordinator in a short period of time to the head coaching ranks: Jay Gruden, Hugh Jackson, and Mike Zimmer. And now this year, on the defensive side of things, the only coach that was the same as the prior year is Paul Gunther as the coordinator. He had a new D-line coach, new linebacker coach, new corner coach, and a new safety coach. So really, all the guys that had been part of the coaching staff on that side of the football for 5 years, it all went away. And with that comes now adjustments are tougher. Now it's like you don't come off the sideline and get a grease board and say, oh, yeah, well, shoot, Pittsburgh tried this against us 3 years ago. Remember, here's what we did. And boom, automatic adjustment. Now it's kind of like wait till halftime, get everybody on the same page. The lines of communication are a little disjointed compared to, when they all grew through things together over a 5-year period. And that's all a factor. There's no question about it.
Dave, let me ask you this, though, because it's different from a fan's perspective than to a player's. Like, for example, in Philadelphia this week, a lot of people are giving the coach Doug Peterson heat because of a lot of bad decisions he's made this year. And I agree with a lot of those fans' remarks, but I remind people that, hey, the coach is in a first year. I'm sure there's a lot of Bengals fans questioning the job Marvin Lewis is doing. When you were a player, and let's say a coach made a bad decision, do players talk about that a lot? Do they talk about that a lot in the locker room, or do they not really go there?
It all depends on what kind of a locker room you have, who your leaders are. If the leaders of your locker room are the solid citizen type, the boat gets raised. If the leaders in the locker room, or I should say, if your best player is not, a high-caliber guy, the ship can sink quicker. If your best players are high-character guys and the leaders that you like to have, you get over that stuff pretty quickly. Because, if players are honest with themselves, okay, you look in the mirror, coach made a mistake, but hell, did you make a mistake during the game? Hell, you probably made more than a handful of them. So, who are you to judge? So it all depends on the construction of your locker room, how that type of stuff flows.
Dave Lapham with us right now on the Zach Gelb Show. When you see Carson Wentz, the quarterback, what have been your impressions so far when you watch him on film?
I'm impressed with him physically. I mean, big, strong kid. He reminds me of a younger version of Ben Roethlisberger, a more mobile Ben Roethlisberger. Now Ben doesn't, he's not able to run around like Carson Wentz. I don't think he really ever was. I mean, Carson Wentz has got great feet. He's got some escapability and some extending of plays to him, and I think he's got a great throwing arm. He's got plenty of arm strength. He can make all the throws. It's just a matter of most rookies. When they do light it up in the very beginning, they are going to come back to earth, and there's a rare exception like a Dak Prescott who has dominant offensive line and a running game. And, I mean, that offensive line has made life easier for the defense, for the skilled players offensively across the board. So, I mean, I do think that Wentz was taking care of the football in the early stages. I see where he's put it on the ground 10 times and lost a couple of them. So he's got to get back to that ball security and making better decisions, throwing the football. I do think that in this league, these coordinators are pretty sharp, and they catch up to tendencies and things of that nature fairly quickly. So, NFL is all about adjustments and adjustments to adjustments and then adjusting again. So Carson's in the midst of all of that.
I think he's the real deal. This offensive line, you mentioned the Cowboys, and you just look at the Eagles. Their offensive line decimated with injuries. Wide receivers, they don't have a lot of talent. They have one good wide receiver right now. That's Jordan Matthews. He's probably a 2 on most teams. You mentioned the coordinators, though. When I look at a game plan, if I was a defensive coordinator, how I would stop the Eagles right now, and I have so much respect for Carson Wentz, but I would take away their run at first and then dare him to throw just because of the lack of talents that he's throwing to right now. Bengals run defense is not that good as we know it. What matchups do you see with the Bengals run defense and the Eagles run game? Because that could ultimately determine the outcome of this game on Sunday.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think they have to make Carson Wentz throw the football because he has to, not because he wants to. And I think a big key is which defense will get either quarterback in 3rd and 7 or more rather than 3rd and 4 or less. So, first and second down consistency equals third down productivity. And I do agree with you. I think the team that makes one quarterback play one-handed, takes away that balance offensively, shuts the running game down, and makes it one-dimensional. I think is going to get a huge edge. I do think that some of the interesting matchups. Kelsey is an unbelievably athletic center, and obviously Domata Peko has not had that strong a year. So that's going to be an interesting matchup, I think, for me to look at. And Geno Atkins, will he be able to get things done against the guards, the interior guys, the Philadelphia Eagles? But like you mentioned, the right tackle position has been, like a turnstile out there in terms of personnel. So Carlos Dunlap, who's had a strong season, got 6.5 sacks. He's also batted down 10 passes. He's the leader, and he's the leader on the team in passes defensed. The next is cornerback Drake Kirkpatrick with 7. So he's batted 10 balls down and leads all defensive linemen in the NFL big time. So that's going to be an interesting thing to watch. Will he be able to handle the running game, and then put pressure on the quarterback? So it is. It's going to be. I think that you got two of the better interior defensive linemen in the entire game. Fletcher Cox, watching him on tape, that is a man. That is a brute strength man. And when so moves, so is Geno Atkins. So watching that matchup is going to be interesting as well.
Just because you bring up Fletcher Cox, he got a big contract, and now he's getting double-teamed more, and the statistics aren't up there. When I still watch him, I do see him be a disruptive force, but the sack numbers aren't there this year. So why are you so high on Fletcher Cox right now? Because a lot of people in Philadelphia, they still think he's a very good player, but right now they're saying the double teams, the sack numbers aren't there, and they're a little concerned because of that.
Well, I think the fact that if you ask his teammates, if you ask guys that are eating a little bit more easily because of the fact that he's a four-hands guy, you have to put more than a pair of hands on him. You have to have two guys on him. So he's a four-hands guy, and Connor Barwin and Graham and everybody else will tell you that makes their life easier. If you're going to double-team him and chip one of those defensive ends, now you don't have as many guys out in the route as you want to. So I think it all starts with if you have a defensive tackle, a 3 technique that every time you come out of the huddle, you got to look for him and say, we have to eliminate him and make sure we get some help over there to get it done. That just has a ripple effect up and down the entire front 7.
Wrapping up with Dave Lapham, who joins us right now. Dave, it seems like there's going to be no A.J. Green in this game. He sounds like it's going to be doubtful. Do you at all, just because of how bad the Bengals are this year, do you see A.J. returning this year, or he has a chance to come back?
I think he does have a chance to come back. He was out on the rehab field this week already, which amazed me because, when you pull a hamstring, it's where you pull its location. The higher up toward the buttocks that it is, the worse position it is. It's in the belly or the middle of the hamstring. It's not quite as bad. And if it's down lower by the knee, it's worse. And his was up high. But honestly, the guy's a freakazoid. He's got an alien body on him. And with all the, method of rehab and everything now, his body responds to it so quickly. It wouldn't shock me if he comes back to the final 2 or 3 games of the season. And there's some incentive there, and he's not that type of player from personal stats, selfishness standpoint, but he's only 36 yards away from getting 1,000 yards. If he would be the second player in NFL history to get 1,000 in his first 6 seasons, the only one's Randy Moss. That's a pretty small roll call, and I think A.J. would like to be part of that. But if the doctors say no, he's not one to push it. But I would not be surprised based on, how his body is that he comes back before the season ends. And I know Marvin Lewis, if the doctors say play, he's okay to play. I know Marvin will play him because, if you got a guard playing with a separated shoulder and you don't play your star receiver, you shut him down and the doctors say he's okay to play. That's a double standard you don't want to, start. So, and AJ's all about that as well. So I think there's a chance. But yeah, he will not see the field on Sunday. He'll maybe a chance the last week or 2.
Dave, since you've been around the game for such a long time, I've never seen an ending like last weekend when the entire Ravens team just held the Bengals. They took a safety and the game was over. When you saw that play develop, what was your reaction?
Well, I did know the rule that the game can end on an offensive penalty. So I saw it unfolding, and I said, oh, man, John Harbaugh, this is interesting. Because I see guys getting tackled left and right and flags coming out, and I'm like, well, they protected the safety. The punter, he stepped out of bounds for the safety. They want to make sure they ran all 11 seconds off. So the game's going to end. The officials were huddling up, and I said, I know the game can end on an offensive penalty. It cannot end on a defensive penalty. If you have a 4-point lead and the team has to score a touchdown, they're inside the 10-yard line, and everybody tackles the intended receiver, it can't end on a penalty like that. So, and then when they said, game over, and the thing is, a couple of weeks before that, I can't remember who it was, but another team in the league did the exact same thing. And the league always sends out videos, showing, okay, this is pushing the interpretation of the rule and yada, yada. So John Harbaugh, like everybody else, saw that. He applied it to that situation. And the way I understand it, the league said it is not against the rules, but it's not within the spirit of the rules. So I wouldn't be surprised if the Rules Committee, changes that, in the off-season. Marvin's part of that Rules Committee. And basically, my understanding is they told teams around the league, if you do it once, that's it. It's not one thing you go back to over and over again. I think they're trying to discourage it. But as of right now, totally legal.
Yeah, it's pretty hypocritical of Harbaugh, because I remember in the playoff game a few years ago against the Patriots, I think he's still whining about the formations the Patriots are running.
Right. Yeah. What's good for the goose isn't always good for the gander, right?
Dave, before we let you run, I know you're a Big 12 analyst for Fox. Let me just ask you this. I know probably, unless if something crazy happens this weekend, there won't be a Big 12 team in the college football playoff. Who do you think should be the 4 teams in the college football playoff?
Boy, that was an interesting one. There's so much to unfold, but your eyeball tells you that Ohio State, should be in there as one of the 4, and I think they will be. Obviously, Alabama, the one that Clemson, if they don't lose, will lock up that number 3 spot, I think. But that 4th one, Washington, if they handle Colorado easily, I don't see how you keep them out. But I know the committee really wants to have Michigan in there. It sounds like they have a 2-hour debate about it. Washington or Michigan, who do we put it for? The fact that they decided to put Washington there, I think if Washington takes care of business against Colorado, they get in. But I do know they'd like to see Michigan in there. And how crazy would that be that if Ohio State and Michigan are in, they finish number 2 and 3 in the Big Ten East, and Penn State wins it, and it doesn't even qualify, and the 2nd and 3rd place division people in the conference end up in the Final Four. That would be crazy.
You're going to have a lot of chaos. The only thing I could think of to just find a situation to clear this thing up is just to expand the playoff. And from people I'm talking to this week, we had Chris Fowler on, we had the commissioner of the American Athletic Conference on. They think they're pretty far away from playoff expansion. So I would just expand it to 8 teams, but it sounds like the committee is fine with having some difficult years and then some easy years.
I think the committee, they haven't had this kind of a year yet. It's been pretty cut and dried. That's why everybody wants to see Penn State win Big Ten, because that would put the heat on, because they beat Ohio State, head-to-head competition. They're the conference champion. How can they not get in there? How can Ohio State be in there and Penn State not? Now you're starting to redefine, okay, why even have conference championships? What good does it do you to go ahead and win and play the extra game and win the conference championship? It gives you no leg up on a team that finished behind you during the regular season, didn't even get into the conference championship. So, yeah, it's going to be very, very interesting. I think eventually, though, this is all going to go away. It'll be 3 16 or 4 16-team superpower conferences that'll thumb their nose at the NCAA and say, we're going to go on our own. We're going to pay players. It's going to be the minor league for the NFL. We'll see you guys later.
Interesting. That would be astonishing. Dave Lapham, great job as always. Enjoy the broadcast on Sunday. Thank you.
Appreciate the opportunity. Have a great one.
Thanks so much. There's Dave Lapham joining us from the Bengals Radio Network. Played for the Bengals from 1974 to 1983. We talked about the college football playoff yesterday. This is going to be chaos. And as a talk show host, I love chaos. Because like I said yesterday, the 4 best teams in the nation to me, no order, Alabama, Ohio State, Clemson, and Michigan. Those are the best 4 teams. And it's not like Michigan had one bad loss on the road, and then they just lost recently to Ohio State on a game, quite frankly, I thought they should have won because they did stop Barrett. However, though, I don't see Michigan getting into the playoff. I think it's going to be Ohio State, Clemson, Alabama, and then you have that decision between, do you go with the Big Ten champion, Penn State, or Wisconsin, or do you go with Washington? I have a feeling they're going to favor the Big Ten. Because if you put in Ohio State and not the Big Ten champion, what are you sending about a conference championship message? It basically, if you do that, it says it's meaningless. And I believe Ohio State and Michigan are better teams than both Penn State and Wisconsin. At the end of the day, that's how the cookie crumbled. That's how it fell. The winner of that game is going to be the Big Ten champion. If you're Washington, though, and you get screwed out of this and you feel like you get screwed, you definitely have an argument because the college football playoff has you in right now. And if they change it the next week, this whole thing, we thought that moving away from the old format would make it easier. It's even more complex now. It's crazy when you get a year like this. That's why it's a very easy solution. Eliminate the conference championship games. You play an 8-team playoff, do the same rankings, an 8-team playoff, and there you go. At max, you're only having a team play. Well, it'll only be really 2 extra games. Because if you win all 3, you take away the conference championship game, the first round replaces that. So let's say if you're Alabama, you're only playing 2 extra games. It's not too absurd. I'm not saying 16 teams. I'm not having some ridiculous, absurd risk of injury. It's a very fair resolution. And it also gives a little bit of power to the little guy from maybe the group of 5, one of those. Not a P5 conference. I think you're going to get Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, and I think it's going to be the Big Ten champion because the Big Ten is the best conference this year in all of college football. 609-919-9200. This is the Zach Gelb Show on Fox Sports 920, the Jersey 920 AM in Bucks, Burlington, and Mercer counties, or worldwide on the web at 920thejersey.com. We'll take a quick break. Time right now in the Princeton Orthopedic Associates studios is 4:37. When we get back, we have to talk about Darrelle Revis. Is he done playing football? Will the Jets even want him back next year? Will they renegotiate that contract? Does he even have the passion anymore? We'll get into all that next on the Zach Gelb Show as we roll along on a Thursday.